To order, we will do a roll call. Phil.
Here.
Zach.
Here.
Mike Ahern.
Here.
John.
Here.
Mike Bouchard.
Here.
Susan. Here. And Mike Bouchard and Susan, I'd like to invite you to be full voting members this evening. Steve Whitman, Carl Evans, and Mark Sturgeon are all excused tonight. All right. Let's see. Next up, minutes from our September 2nd meeting. Any comments, corrections on the minutes?
I think that they're fine in the digital copy that June shared, but there's something funky with this printed copy. There's like a page missing or something, or duplicated, which is,
It got weird when I copied it. I thought
Oh, I see.
these
Yeah.
two inside pages are the same.
There is a duplicate.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's like a missing, like
Yeah.
this page I think is missing.
It was weird because it,
We have two, and
maybe I have the page numbers.
Which again, I looked at it digitally, so.
I have a printed version from before. If anyone wants to look at that, at those minutes, or we could.
I only have my pedantic comment that I think acknowledgement might be misspelled
Where's that?
with an extra E. Number 4.
Okay.
Am I correct about that? This is like my school teacher stuff coming out.
I'm
or
not
something.
sure.
On which one?
This is really like insignificant. It's a potential spelling error. The school teacher.
Acknowledgement on number 4.
Oh,
I think the E after the G is extra.
yeah, I think you're right.
Doesn't really change the substance of it, but
No, but it'll make them look nicer. All right. Any other corrections for the minutes? Maybe a motion to approve?
I move we approve the minutes.
Second. All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Next up is acknowledgement with an E there. Maybe that is correct.
I don't know, or maybe it's optional.
Yeah, might be worked both ways.
The British spelling or something.
Acknowledgement of communications received. Have we received any communications, June?
No. The only thing I was going to mention that we got today a different set of guidelines that is posted at Town Hall. So trying to encourage 6 feet of distance, and not to say that that hasn't been kind of known beforehand. So hence the extra table, but people, I think, understand the rules at this point. So.
All right. Next up, we have applications and public hearings. We have a very confusing boundary line adjustment between 3 parcels at 484 and 492 Daniel Webster Highway. PID numbers 233-033, number 233-034, and 233-035. This is in the agricultural zone. So for the applicant, we need to have a discussion about the completeness of the application before we can rule it as complete, which is then when we can deliberate on your application and open up the public hearing. So I'm assuming one of you 3 is here to present as a representative of the applicant. So if you want to come up to the mic, and Mike, right there. Yeah, right in the hot seat there. And just present any specific waivers, or just give a general overview of your subdivision. Boundary line adjustment.
Very well. For the record, my name is Brian Bailey. I'm a surveyor from Guilford. I'm here with Mr. Ahern this evening, and he is the owner of all 3 of these parcels of land. And one of them is a 109-acre parcel of land that kind of surrounds the 2 properties that I have shown in their entirety on the map that is presented before you this evening. I'm sure you're all familiar with the location of this property. It's just south of Town Hall and near the River Road intersection. The old schoolhouse is on one of these lots that Mr. Ahern owns. It's lot number 34 on the map. The mask causes me to fog up a little bit here. I've prepared two plans to show you the project in its entirety and its compliance with subdivision regulations for the topography, the wetlands, and the boundary of, as I said, the two lots, not the 108-acre lot. So, what we're doing here is really not that confusing if you look at the plan that does not have the topography, because that's what really makes it confusing. And the planner has done a beautiful job. She prepared a colored rejection plan here. And it's very straightforward that the existing property lines that are to be abandoned are shown as dashed lines. And the new property lines are shown as, you might expect, solid lines. And a summary of what's going on here is pretty straightforward. Lot number 34 originally is 50,460 square feet, as is shown on the map as original lot. Then behind that lot, or to the south, there's parcel A. That is the land mass from lot number 34 that's being annexed to the 108-acre lot. Then there's parcel B, which is running along the side, on the northwest side of the original lot number 34. Essentially, it's a 10-foot wide strip of land. And that's coming from the abutting lot number 35 and being annexed to lot number 34. So, it's pretty straightforward. Original lot minus A plus B, you end up with the final lot configuration and 48,818 square feet. Then if we play the game again with lot number 35, originally it's 92,577 square feet. As I said before, parcel B is being taken away from it, and then you'll see that parcel C wraps around both the southern and western side of the ultimate lot number 35, and it's identified as parcel C, 23,946 square feet. And then one little odd duck is parcel D. This little tiny triangle right up at the road frontage, right up there by Route 3, and that is 286 square feet that's being transferred from the back lot, 103 acres. I keep saying 108. It's 103 into lot number 35. Okay, so that's how the little bits and pieces go. And I was asked earlier to explain to you the frontage situation that's taken place here. And as I said moments ago, parcel B is essentially a 10-foot wide strip of land. So 10 foot of frontage from lot number 35 is being annexed to lot 34. In the last little bit of the puzzle, lot D has 16 feet of frontage. So, all things being equal, we think that everything is in order. There's one other oddity that needs to be identified. And if you look really close, you're going to see a dashed dot line approximately 8 feet back and running parallel with Route 3. Mm-hmm. That's because there's a plan on file that was done, a survey plan, back in 1975, where this property had been surveyed and put on record by a fella, let's see, Trogiano Rhines Surveying out of Plymouth. And they identified that right away for Route 3 as being 66 foot. It's not. It's a 3-rod road. So what I have done here today is I've moved the frontage of the lines out to the 3-rod right of way, just so that you're completely aware of what's taking place here. So the frontages were reported improperly, you know, on that prior survey and on the deeds that were actually drafted against it. And I say that, and then I finish it off with, but clearly the property goes to the road, regardless of the dimensions or the meets and bounds, as it's called, because it calls for the road. And there is the road, and the highway department has their plans, and we've tied into all that stuff. So that's full disclosure of how and why all the things are being taken place here. And I guess the last thing that you probably are wondering is why. Well, the why is really got to do with access. Mr. Ahern's large field and barn is to the south and east of this lot, and he has a rather steep embankment for his road frontage to the north of these two lots. And it was most appropriate, and actually probably the only way to get at it and put a driveway on that northwestern side of lot number 35 was to put it in such a way as it went over the line. So there it is. There's the why. And lastly, this does require state of New Hampshire subdivision review and approval. It does. These are existing lots of record that were never approved for subdivision. Never in their entire life. They predate subdivision existence. I have turned all this into Concord, and I am still waiting for it. I got so upset a couple of days ago after having replied to them by email. I made a phone call and found out why it hasn't been returned. The review agent, right after accepting the plan, went on a 6-week vacation, and nobody's picked up his workload. So that's the reason why we don't actually have the approval number. So I would ask that upon your deliberation that you would see it appropriate to grant a conditional approval, as I believe everything here is in compliance with the town's regulations for this boundary line adjustment. There are no new lots, there are no new dwellings contemplated or going to be the result of anything that we do here tonight. So this is totally an internal modification of the existing property lines within one man's property. And I hope that was a reasonable explanation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you do have.
I think between the color coding and your description, it was a lot easier to understand than I thought it would be. So, any questions from the board about the completeness of this application?
I have a question for the board. Do we need confirmation of the frontage line and where that is drawn, since we are talking about two different lines, the dotted line, dotted dash line, and the old survey? Does that need to get confirmed in some way to approve this?
I guess I had missed that detail in my review of it. I mean, I guess I would, based on what Brian has said, that I would trust your reading of the deeds, and if you have documentation that it is the other Rhines Toriano plan was incorrect, then perhaps, is there a note on the plan that could be added? Or maybe there is. Hold on.
Well, let us take a quick peek.
Let's see one. To maybe mention that there was a previous plan that this one supersedes based on, survey and deed review and
there's no note with that specific language, and I'd be happy to add that to it. The only sideways, I guess, mention to that is by virtue of the deeds which are identified on the plan.
Yeah.
And
Well, just maybe make a note reference.
I'll make a note, that'll be no problem. And then I'll also include the highway layout plan, which I actually have I made a separate plan that got recorded of these two lots a couple of years ago. And let me see.
I think it could be addressed.
I'm pretty sure this got recorded, didn't it, Bruce? You know, this is a boundary evidence plan that we prepared way back in '05, and its primary purpose on this plan, if I may, was to sort out the frontage along the road, the river, and over here on this discontinued road. And I do believe this plan is recorded at the registry.
Yeah, I think so.
This is one of my copies. I'm going to hand it to you first of all. And you're going to see that on this plan, it clearly shows the lots we're talking about tonight. And it clearly shows the duality, as it were. The road right of way, the reference to the highway layout, the layout per the plan 1227-42. So this is definitely what has taken place, and I actually have a copy of the Trogiano plan. Would I do
I got that. You actually gave us that a copy. I just
Did I?
didn't provide it to the board because I didn't.
Yeah. Well, that was my purpose, is to make sure that you had all the facts.
There's.
So what I'll add another note to our most recent plan to kind of.
So can you open that one back up again? Because I think it lists the frontage on of the lots as they exist now, right? You've got 108.71 feet
Yeah.
and whatever this is, 118.16.
Well, that's the way that they're improperly described on the Trogiano plan, and if you go
Okay.
further, you'll see that
Yeah.
the
I see what you're
frontage
saying.
is really out along the three-rod wide right-of-way.
So could you add on here the frontage? I'm sort of jumping in here, sorry.
Because those lot lines aren't parallel, what you're saying is the frontage is actually less than what's claimed on that
That is
early
correct.
plan.
Both
Because it
sidelines
tapers
are
in,
tapering
so if you move it closer to the road, it's actually less.
That's correct.
But we would like to know what the frontage is before and after the lot line adjustment. I mean, I realize this lot here is getting 10 feet, right? This blue.
Yeah.
And this one's getting 16 feet, right?
Correct.
So while my concern was that these two lots are non-conforming, lots 34 and 35 are non-conforming in terms of the amount of frontage, because they should have 150 feet.
But they're being made less non-conforming.
But they're being made less non-conforming. So if we just had a note, even if it was addressed by a note saying after lot line adjustment, the frontage is.
That's why I presented it to you the way I did.
Yep.
This line in the middle, I'm telling you, is 10 feet
I understand.
additional.
Yeah,
And the triangle is completely from the other lot.
Right.
So it's a 10 and 16 foot
right.
modification. And to present it otherwise is almost a mathematical.
But what you're saying is lot 35 is gaining 16 feet on one side, but it's losing 10 on the other.
Yes.
So
There it
that-
is.
So there's a net
Exactly
6.
what
there's a
happened.
net positive of 6 to this one and a net positive of 10 to that one,
Yes,
presuming that we're
At
talking
the
about
new
that
line.
forward line.
yes. That's exactly the way to look at it.
Right.
Because it gets way too complicated with those converging lines.
Yeah,
And the arrow. Which frontage do you read?
Right.
So I'm telling you, that's, I think, the most appropriate way to look at it. And it clearly meets the standard of more nearly conforming, not less.
But is there anything on your plan that, besides what you verbally said, that this has a length of 16 feet on that
That's
curve?
parcel D, yes.
Right, but where does this say 10 feet for this one?
It doesn't.
Okay.
It doesn't.
So then, because for our assessing
Yeah.
data and all that, if we could at least have something that says, so they can
Mhm.
indicate where it's going, that's all. we have that in our tax map. So
I'll
what
do
the
that.
resulting frontage is there and there. Okay?
Yes.
Okay. Questions from the board about the completeness of this application?
Actually, I'm just going to ask one more question. So I'm assuming, right, to confirm, there's no additional structures on here that are not shown, right? That would make any setbacks thrown off by this.
Correct. Everything has been identified.
Okay.
Make a motion that we accept the plan as complete.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, so it is now accepted as complete. Any other questions from the board?
What is the rod length? Is it 13?
15.5 feet.
16?
Thank you for asking that, because, yeah.
What's a chain?
4 rods.
Thank you.
4 rods. I was gonna go into something else, but I won't. 4 perches also.
Ah.
Any other questions from the board? All right, I'll open it up to the public hearing. It's 6:52. Anyone from the public wish to speak of any nature about this project? Okay, it's almost 6:53, and I'll close the public hearing. It's a lot less official when I don't use the gavel, so we'll close it and bring it back to the board.
Actually, oh no, sorry. So the parent lot wraps around both. It comes to the front on both parcels. So if we're losing 16 feet off of lot 35, presumably, my only question is that going to leave 150 feet? So are you?
Talking about lot 33?
So yeah, what I'm looking at currently, I'm actually looking.
So I know what you're talking about, Phil. Can I jump in to try to
Yeah,
explain?
please, please.
So I actually,
Future
I actually
subdivision.
really looked into this
Yeah.
when Bruce originally called me about it,
Yeah.
like this, I
If that's
forget when, back months
165 and he's
ago.
taking 16, you're going to go down
Right,
to
but the issue is
149.
that because this wraps around, there's additional frontage
Right.
on the other side. So the total, we don't really address that kind of piecemeal frontage.
Right.
So that we just say that's got frontage. So it's actually got, well, this, our tax map, whether it's accurate or not, shows 165.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, it has 205 and then plus 80. So there's plenty of frontage on
Right.
that lot.
My only concern is that, would the applicant be reducing their potential for future subdivision by creating less than 150 feet of frontage on that?
Potentially, yeah.
Where, if he wanted to right now, he could come back off that and subdivide a parcel off, but if he makes it less than 150, it wouldn't be conforming.
150 is the
as it
requirement.
currently is.
And so it's going to knock it down.
I mean, I think we can approve it as it is, but my only,
Knocks his frontage on that side down to 149, so he's,
well, I mean, maybe, depends on how accurate it is.
Regardless of this move, an extra 16 feet, you're still not going to get 2 frontage worth on that upper parcel. So
It's fine as it is. My only concern is, is
Future.
it,
There's
is
210 feet on that side, less the 16.
okay. All right, so
Okay.
this number that's on the tax map that shows 165 is not accurate.
That's correct.
All right,
Here's the
thank you.
stone wall at the corner.
All right.
And here's the measure. Again, this is the map that we put together years
This is
ago.
the old one,
And here's that triangle,
I see.
and we're coming out here now, right?
right up into about here.
Okay.
And this measure is from the old corner
Yeah.
to the property line. And then, of course, as mentioned earlier,
Yeah, yeah.
we've got all this frontage over here.
Yeah, I'm not concerned that there isn't sufficient frontage
Okay.
here. I'm just worried about if you wanted to subdivide this later, would there be enough frontage to make an individual parcel there?
Yes,
if
there
you
is.
chose to?
Yes, there is.
So that's all I was worried about. Just, moving that line a foot or two, if
It could be significant.
if 16 is more than you need to move, you might benefit from leaving a foot or two on that parent lot on the other side. But your call.
I think we're all set.
Okay. Great.
Mike?
So full disclosure, I am related to the applicants, and my family has property that abuts this 109-acre piece, but I'm fully comfortable with voting whether to approve or not.
Okay, I did say this last time that if you're any way related to an abutter,
I'm
whether-
probably related to a bunch of,
well, I mean, I guess not related to, if you are a beneficiary of an abutting parcel, if it's someone you're related to, I think that's a different story, but if you're a beneficiary of a trust or something like that on an adjacent parcel, that to me says that you should be recusing yourself, right?
yeah, I'm fine.
Is there a statutory requirement to?
So
It's up to
this-
the, it's up to
it's
the,
a-
to
it's
the
up
board
to
member
the-
themselves whether they step down or not. And also I want to mention that my property just up the road, my farm, is the same 3-rod wide. It's different in different sections of Route 3, and I'm fully believe that it's 3-rod at that section too.
Okay.
I move we approve on the condition of
I closed it.
Oh, all
state
Yeah, I
approval.
saw the gavel, yeah.
right, thank you.
I'll second John's.
So I think we've got the subdivision approval, and then there's a couple details that we need on the plan. Do we want those as a conditional approval as well? I'm sure, so we want to have the note about the right-of-way clarity, and then a box around parcel D, just so it matches the other parcels. I think that makes it more clear. And then the note 4 should have the frontage of both before and after the, oh gosh, the boundary line adjustment.
And the septic approval.
Except, yes, so in the DES approval.
Fine with me?
Good? All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything informational, application reviews?
See you, Jan.
No.
Other business from members of the board and planning staff. So we have a waiver of site plan review requirements for 2 proposed sites.
We received, or I received a phone call from an individual that's looking to put the same person, 2 new restaurant or one, I guess one's or food establishments. So they were asking about the 2 locations that they're looking at. One location is at I'm sorry, I thought it was 47 Main. I think this is an error on this notice of decision. I think it's supposed to be 47 Main, not 74 Main. But it's where in November 21st, 2019, the planning board did approve a site plan review application for a change of use to have Sweet Station and an ice cream smoothie and bubble tea shop, for those of you that may have been on the board then. So it's not, I don't know what was in there, some kind of retail or
It
something.
was the Republican headquarters.
Right, okay, you're right. It was I think the grayish building as you head south on the left. So because that was a change of use from sort of office space to a restaurant type, the board in November 2019, so it is 2 years ago almost. I think that business was there for a short time, right before COVID hit. I don't know exactly the timeline. But it hasn't, it's still, I don't know if they ever really opened, but, so they want to go in there. And I felt like because it had the previous approval, it was be fine to waive site plan review for that. Because I don't know anything's been in there since then. It's kind of been hard to tell with COVID and things like that. So
They were open.
They were open.
They were
yeah.
open? Okay. So that one should be all right to go ahead without any additional site plan review. I just wanted you guys to know about it, so if in case they go in there. I think it's gonna be more of a walk-up takeout business there.
What is it going to be again, Jim?
Some sort of food offering.
That's the one that's related to the food truck, one of their food trucks, I think, right?
I think it has a notice in the window. There has been an issue about ventilation in the building with the housing above, but that's a building inspecting issue that they're working through, okay? The second one, again, the same person is looking to go into Tenny Mountain Highway Plaza, which Don Stope is part of the ownership of that. So it's basically where Roma Joe's is going in, just across the street. It's got a variety of businesses there. I took a picture of it the other day, but I couldn't. There's insurance, there's, oh, now I can't remember what it is. So we have an old site plan from back probably in the 80s or so for that property. So I pulled it out. My main concern was there enough parking. I believe that there's 6 storefronts in there, and the mix has sort of changed over time. At one point, there was a restaurant in there. I don't think where they're going is in one of the kind of the bays, the sections where their restaurant was, but there's been a lot of different changes. I believe they're taking over partly a vacant space and that was more previously used as office. So it's in a larger establishment. I did pull out a site plan. I didn't realize there's parking around out back, so I can pass that around. There seems to be plenty of parking at the site, again, but technically it's a change of use. So I did talk to the person that wants to open the restaurant, and Don Stope said I would just bring it to the board and just make sure everybody was okay with not requiring a site plan. There's really nothing that would happen there except interior renovations, and there seems to be plenty of parking. And it's been a well-established kind of thing. So that would be my recommendation, to let them proceed without burdening them with site plan review.
I would agree.
Okay. Anybody? You can keep passing it around.
I think interpretation of use is somewhat subjective. Is this next? So is it going to be next to the? Is this the 7-Eleven building?
No, it's got. Let's see if I can.
Flippin' furniture.
I had to dump a bunch of pictures.
There were where one of the cell carriers was there in there too?
That's the one before that.
That's one before.
It's got that, it's got
It's
the
the one with
oil
the-
company it used to be.
Fuels.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Flippin'
I mean,
Furniture.
River
Bond
Fuels.
Auto Parts was in there.
It's
Yeah.
Pemmy Fuels. Flippin' Furniture is where that one says. I think the restaurant
Okay.
used to be.
Mm-hmm.
NFP, maybe is that insurance? Insurance.
Yeah.
There is now a sign, an H&R Block is in there, and in between those it says Yamas. I think it's a Greek kind of. It is a temporary sign that's up there. Miracle Ear and something that I can't read what it says.
It's a yoga studio, I think.
That closed, and now I think it's maybe a hair salon.
Right, it is a hair salon.
I mean, I'm remembering like video
Got the
maniacs
traffic.
there.
It also has
and,
the traffic light.
Video.
It's a very
Video maniacs, yeah.
VHS
Dirty
Which of these
screen.
fronts is it going into?
It's the one that says
The one that
Yamas.
says Yama?
Yes, that's that one.
No,
So it's
not
right.
that
It
point.
does have the traffic light now with the alignment of Boulder Point Road, so it's right across from there.
Anybody else need this for a refresher?
No. All right.
Great.
No concerns. Okay. I just wanted because if you drove by and saw it, I just wanted you to know about
The
them.
fish from the aquarium store.
Yes, Michael?
So.
Riverside Landing update.
So I put this on the agenda not knowing if I would have an update. I really don't have one. I did go to the select board meeting on Monday evening at the board's request to give an update, and we talked about some of the things I've mentioned before. I most recently did go through the revised easements of maybe about a week ago, 10 days ago or so, gave a couple suggestions, trying to ask about a trail, because I know the town's been interested in that. Sent that to the Mike McGinley, Riverside Landing's attorney. She wrote right back basically saying that her client may have some issues too because of liability of having that, given the purpose of the Claybrook kind of parcel easement is to protect more wetlands and habitat for potential species that may be displaced, or it's really about tied to the wetlands permit. So we're waiting to hear back from Lori Summer from DES, who really is in the Wetlands Bureau, to see what the state would really accept. So as I said to the select board, I think I tried to explain, like, I feel like the town needs to recognize that in order to allow that development there needs to be the wetlands permit. And this is really a conditions of the state's wetlands permit. So if we can keep trying to ask about a trail there, but it's kind of like if that's more the priority, then there could be jeopardizing that wetlands permit and that Riverside Landing development. I don't know if it will end up at that, but I think that was something that I think is worth considering of how far do we go with it.
May I ask, when we say a trail there, do we mean like through the conservation land, like in general, or do we mean the one that's proposed along the river?
So there was
These two separate things?
Yeah, there are two different things. There's actually a trail easement area on the Riverside Landing plan that we looked at
Yep.
back 7 months ago or so. This is on the adjacent parcel that needs to be conserved as compensation for destroying wetlands as related to filling that next phase of it. So I have not heard back from the attorney or the state to know where things really stand, but I want you to know I did ask. The other question is if, again, the town's role in monitoring an easement, is the current owner would still own it. At some point, that person could sell it to anybody. But no matter who owns it, the town, as the holder of the easement, would have a responsibility to monitor it. So even if a trail was allowed, if all of a sudden a trail becomes, some nice loops and additional trails, and the state did allow one trail, then the town would be holding the responsibility to inform the landowner, hey, the terms of the easement say you get this, now there's these other things, you've got to shut down those other trails. So there is responsibilities that come for both the landowner and the town. And the more the state, I think, would, from talking to Lori Summer earlier, my interpretation of what she said was that the state was concerned about having lots of, they want to minimize the number of people in there to minimize damage to habitat and sensitive species that have been identified in there. So we'll see. So that's my update.
In the town's long-term strategic plan, one of the goals that's outlined in there is to try to get a trail that goes from roughly where the town gardens are to get to Smith Bridge.
That's what I was asking about, yeah.
And so if we were to accept that easement and that easement does not allow any trail to pass through that piece of property, then there's actually no path to get from here to there.
Yeah.
So then it becomes a question of, is the town's long-term strategic plan to open up a path that gets from here to there more important than enabling that piece of development?
Yeah.
So that's going to be the push and shove.
Mm-hmm.
The plan is nice, but I think it's hard to.
Well, and that parcel is, behind another one where I think 7-Eleven is the former liquor store or U.S. Cellular, that little thing. So there is another parcel. I'd have to really go back and look at the property map, but I believe, you could maybe pull it in closer to Tenny Mountain Highway and get the right to go behind that building or something. I don't know what the topography, wetlands, other issues might be, but there might be another way around without having to come onto Tenny Mountain Highway. So, or who knows? So that was my update. Any other questions about it? The only other update I didn't have on the agenda is about Rap City, the last site plan 2 weeks ago that was conditionally approved with, still needing to meet and the engineers' comments, the town engineers' comments. So I got all that information, the notice of decision to the applicant and the engineer, his engineer that was here, Nick Segal, and have heard nothing since. So it made me realize too, by giving, I just kind of a little coaching to the planning board, by giving that condition of approval, there's no incentive really for them to quickly address those things. So I guess I'm just gonna say, I would have preferred that we had those engineer comments addressed, the plans revised, another look at it, and we could have looked at that tonight to make sure that those things get done in a timely manner. Now it's just going to be sitting there. We didn't put a good timeline on it, I guess, which would have been the other approach when we had all those things for the engineers' comments to say, well, you've got till the end of the month to do it, or something like that. So,
How about
just, you know, I mean,
other
things
parts
happen, whatever.
Of the conditions, has anything been, you know, the development agreement or anything like that, that's all?
I haven't had the time to draft
Okay.
it, but there's no point drafting it because we don't have a
the plan,
revised
yeah.
plan yet.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the first step, so
Yeah.
there's no rush on it, on that piece. You know, so I have not talked to Mr. McGinley to know where he's at. It's just, I haven't reached, it's also, he can reach out to me, not, I'm not gonna chase him down, so.
Okay.
But just I guess this, trying to remember to set timelines would be a good thing, so. Anyway, on to more fun things. Non-conformity.
I've always been struck by the requirement here, and it turns out that it's not allowed anyway.
Which one?
All right, so in 401-2A, basically requiring voluntary merger of non-conforming lots.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So, I'll just jump into this if you're all right. There's a lot of information here. Susan Slack from Lakes Region Planning Commission, who is helping me out a little bit, part-time. You know, I asked her, because of her background and knowledge, that we would be, you know, rather than doing some of this routine stuff with applications, that I wanted her to have a fresh look at the things. So she wrote this memo, which I shared with you, about a quick look at, and we chatted just briefly. She's like, yeah, that's kind of odd. There's sort of conflicting parts. So often when you make zoning amendments or look at things, you know, it's typical to go look at what other towns have done, and it doesn't mean, I know I talked to Mike about this recently, please don't think I should just put town A, B, and C, but then it's too much work to take one town's name off for another. But you just look to see what other towns, to see how, you know, usually I try to find like maybe 3 other towns or cities in New Hampshire, how do they handle this? And you kind of read through and pick the parts you like. You can tell when some other community has invested some time and energy, and this kind of stuff is pretty standard, but there's different ways of presenting it that gives clarity, and there's some nuances that one town might do and not another. So she went, and I did suggest Concord, because that's a much bigger community with lots more complexity. You know, I read through theirs. I didn't make hard copies of it because I felt like there was just way too much for Plymouth in there, but it gives you some reference, all right? And then Guilford and Moultonborough were the 2 other ones that she picked. I also took the section from our ordinance and tried to share that with you, some of my comments on it about, I think the real thing to sort of step back is nonconformity occurs for lots, uses, and structures. But we really, in our sections, only talk about uses and a little bit about non-complying structures, not really non-conforming. So it gets all confused about what you're really talking about. Non-conforming happens when something that was possibly an older lot, like the ones we looked at tonight, that maybe got subdivided or created prior to the town having a zoning ordinance and or subdivision regulations. So that something could have happened where, you know, lots were created a long time ago. We have tons and tons of those around. Every community does. Because zoning really just came in New Hampshire in the 50s and 60s, even 70s. And some towns still don't have zoning. There's a handful out there. So anything that was permitted previously was allowed because maybe there was no zoning, or perhaps something changed in the zoning and was amended that created the no longer in conformance. Now you have something that's non-conforming with the current ordinance. So you have to find a way to express what happens with it. And to be honest, one of the things that brought this up was months ago, and talking with the Aherns about this application tonight. So I wanted to because that question was about the frontage. You're sort of they figured out a way to make each lot less non-conforming, but they're not conforming. So we don't address that in our ordinance, so I think that's something to add. In my opinion, I went through the Guilford ordinance and really found that to have some good clarity and readability, and felt that was probably the best model for us to start with. A couple things I liked about it was that they mentioned that accessory dwelling units, this is again a newer use, can be added in on non-conforming lots. So again, non-conforming lots usually are either too small in terms of acreage or the frontage is too small, all right? So the general guideline on that is if they should still be allowed to be buildable, provided you could get a structure on and meet the setbacks. That's kind of the general idea, all right? So I feel like what Guilford said was pretty well spelled out there. And let's see. The non-conforming uses are about, maybe you have a business in a zone, in a building that in a zone that's no longer allows that type of business or something's changed. So you have to allow that to continue. The question is, can you expand it to take over, 1,000 more square feet of the building? So generally you kind of set some boundaries of like how much space it can take, outdoor space, indoor space, that kind of thing. And what happens if that use gets abandoned? And I find our ordinance is sort of confusing because in one place it talks about, if a non-conforming use is changed to something conforming after 3 months, so you can't go back to the non-conforming, but if it's abandoned, you get a year before you can go back. So that's, you'd want those things to be consistent. About discontinued uses, expansion, Moultonborough did have a statement, which is not really in Guilford's, I don't think, as I read it, that saying that no expansion to other parts of the lot. So if it's more of a, think about like some types of businesses that you might want to move and add to over there, so you're maybe including that. The seasonal use part, I think we could eliminate that. I don't know if it really matters in Plymouth, but perhaps for campgrounds or something, it might be worth just leaving it there. I think there's some aspects about vertical additions that were very confusing. I would suggest taking out on the last part under middle of the page, on the second page of Guilford's there.
I think.
Other pieces, so.
Is that vertical addition getting at enlargement by up? Because so I think I've seen other towns define enlargement by increasing either the footprint or height of.
Right.
So no non-conforming structure may be enlarged, but some towns interpret that only as a footprint, and they'll
Right.
let you go up. Some towns say
Yeah.
enlargement is any dimension. You can't even raise a roof line to sneak a room under like a dormer or something like that.
So that's something to consider. You could kind of go with this. It's just a little hard to interpret, I found. So, I guess, yeah, you can, if it's within this part of the building, you can then can you go up and add the use?
Right.
The reality for a place like Plymouth is probably that's, as soon as I say that, and we make an amendment the next time, we'll get an application next week or something. But, you can't write a regulation for everything, but my goal of presenting this was to show you kind of why this is really hard for us to interpret and give some examples of where I think we could kind of find a way as an amendment to just say, let's clean this up, make it more clear for property owners and everything else. So Rebecca then reminded me too about this part of the, keep one, you want to pass that down? That several years ago, there was another change, and I have seen this before and just sort of totally forgot about it when I was putting it together, so thank you for Rebecca for sending this. That in another part of our zoning ordinance, a few pages before, and I just copied, so that what you're seeing here is my notes that I've just been scratching on, my copy of the zoning ordinance. So there's this diagram here tries to address that bit of how you can make an addition to a building, to a non-conforming building, either by special exception or variance. So this looks like the idea is that you can have, in this regard, addition number one. It's pretty clear. Addition number one, you could go on by special exception because it's moving into that setback area, but it's keeping a nice building line. But you can't make that encroach further, like with addition number two, the way that's configured. If that makes sense, all right? So that's the whole structure, the pre-existing structures within the setback. But you can put an addition on the back because it's within the setbacks, all right? The only problem with this is that it's in an area that really doesn't deal with, this is about nonconformity, and it's after page 17, which deals with area dimensions on the previous page, and then right before some of the aspects of uses, which really aren't uses, that's really more about lot sizes. So it's all kind of a confusing place. So it might also be worth amending the goal from this, I think, kind of is already, we can find a way to bring it into what kind of Guilford's saying.
Yeah, because the,
And furthermore, I just wanted to point out that section 401.C basically says no structures are allowed in front, side, and rear yards.
So,
So that completely conflicts with this statement. I understand what the town was trying to do here, because obviously there'd been some people trying to make additions, to the side of a building, stay within a front building line that makes sense, or, the configuration. I get that, and I think that's fine by special exception, but it conflicts with that other part.
so the part of 401.2C that you highlighted, meaning that except no side yard shall be less than 10 feet, appears to try to, that would be a variance to get to that point anyway, and I don't believe the ZBA can be held to limit a decision to 10 feet, right?
Right, and it conflicts with the rest of it.
Right.
How can it say that? And I don't think, and I think.
That language should be struck regardless, because
Right.
once it goes to a variance request, it can be anything down to 0 if the ZBA approves
And I did,
it.
and it's a separate that's 401.2, it's
401.2C.
401.4.
Okay.
That I don't have in front of you here. Part C says no structure may occupy any part of a required front yard, side yard, or rear, so that's in conflict
Right, it is.
with everything.
So no structures at all, including the primary structure?
Right, no structure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, it's just saying you have setbacks, you gotta follow them.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if this meant like no additional structures. Whatever that word is missing there or something.
Yeah, well, that's again,
We don't know, but.
Right, but then we define fences as structures if they're over a certain
Right,
height,
yeah,
right?
that's another part, so,
And-
yeah. So that's just, you try to add in one, this is what happens with zoning ordinances over decades, like you add in one thing to try to, oh, this new thing came up, we'll just stick it in here, and you don't realize it
Right.
creates conflicts elsewhere.
It is.
So this general provisions just drives us crazy, so I just was trying to say, so I know there's a lot of information here, but are you, maybe you're not ready to answer the question, but would you be willing to kind of accept this sort of this Guilford approach with some, and I can try to write up, and with Susan's help, something that amends, I guess it would really be 405 about non-conforming uses and maybe some other areas to kind of remove some of these conflicts, that kind of addresses it more in a Guilford-esque kind of way.
yeah, it seems like we need a little more clarity on non-conforming lots, uses, and structures.
Well, that's and that's the other part. We don't really address non-conforming lots, except to say you can build on them if they're pre-existing and you
Yeah.
follow the setbacks, maybe.
I remember having this conversation with Chris Northrup in 1987.
That's pretty clear. That's great.
Yeah, I remember exactly, sitting in his office and talking about it, and the town was aware of it way back then, and it was just something that they dealt with on a case-by-case basis, rather than trying to make a hard and fast rule on a lot of things.
The problem with that is it leaves us open to lawsuits if somebody feels aggrieved by the process. I mean, and they can document that the town's done something different in a different situation, and like we're vulnerable to having our decision.
Yeah,
There's a
especially
difference,
when,
there's a difference between having some flexibility in the
Yeah.
rules versus having contradictions in the rules.
Right. Oh, I agree.
Flexibility is good.
right,
Contradictions are not.
right, and I
I
think that,
agree.
yeah, I agree as well. Yeah.
So speaking of that then, like if, I do agree with like the Guilford rules are pretty good. When it comes to this diagram here versus no structures, these are some conflicts that would need to be resolved. I mean, what's outlined in that diagram is really positive in many ways.
Yeah, yeah, and
It's a
I-
good thing to have.
And I think it's actually pretty clear. I like
Yeah.
it. It just kind of is in the wrong
Yeah.
place, and then it needs to have those
Yeah.
other pieces. So it's kind of this cascading domino thing. You fix this, and then you try to find, and then fences will be part of it too.
Right.
But I
I
think
kind of
adding-
wonder if we should just redefine fences to not be structures and just say fences are allowed.
Yeah,
You
that
know.
might be a better.
That would be a real nice.
'Cause I mean, that's
I
come
agree.
up so many times that we can say,
Yeah,
because I mean, people do want the ability to have privacy screening fences and back and side yards, and if we're limiting fences to 4 feet, and if they're over that, they're a structure, and they I don't know. I mean, I think that people should be able to fence, at least in, yeah.
Having lived in
Any
places with high privacy fences,
Yeah.
I can see the reason people want to limit them. And the question is, well, how do you word that? Are they structures? And there's a benefit of calling them structures, because then you can't put them near the edge as those privacy fences. They serve other purposes on your property as structures. I mean, I think there's a logic behind calling them structures. I understand it causes difficulty in other places, and I don't know what the resolution to that is. But I think there is a benefit of calling them structures after a certain height, and just in terms of the practical nature of.
There are fire code issues too. If you have,
Yeah.
a fence down a property line, and if there's 15 feet between a house and the
Yeah.
property line, and another house within 15 feet, and there's a fence down the middle, like, you may not be able to get in there to fight a fire in one or two of the houses. Like,
I've looked a
so
little bit
there-
at
there are
fences
fire code
before. I
separation.
just, and there's a lot of conflicts with it, so I think I can kind of tell, go with the more flexible interpretation of what you can do with fences, and then kind of bring that back at another time. Again, that should all be sort of under definitions and general provisions that I keep sort of hounding about, that needs to be looked at.
I made a long list of stuff about definitions at some point. You want me to send you that?
Did you what?
Made a long list of. I went like combed through them.
Oh, great. Yeah, send it to
I'll
me.
just send it over to you. Okay.
So it sounds like nonconformity in the zoning ordinance is something we need to deal with for this upcoming amendments schedule. The issue of perhaps making 6 or more unit multifamily dwellings by special exception is maybe something we want to think about putting in, or at least adding clarity, or saying no, we don't want multifamily homes.
And then in what zones?
Right. So, and then any definitions are always helpful.
So along those lines, the blue kind of colored sheet there on the left, but has the zoning amendment schedule, and I made a copy of it, and I realized I needed to actually look at it in relationship to I think it's on the other side. Is there something on the other side? Yeah, I just took sort of from starting in October till town meeting time. And the bright yellow is trying to identify when our planning board meetings are, so that's why I had to change in my red ink on the blue side as to why for our schedule, unless we needed to create a new special planning board meeting time, which I feel like you guys give plenty of time, why not just kind of keep in mind the dates for requiring, it has to be 10 days before a meeting for posting any amendments, not counting the day of the meeting or the day it gets posted. So in actuality, I didn't look at the schedule for like the record enterprise, so that's another piece I need to check on to adjust those dates a little bit, because that makes it even, you're not hitting the proper, and then the date I actually have to get the notice in, so
So that means
we're looking probably more like December 15th to actually decide what we're going to do, because I have to get the notice to the paper and whatever timeline,
so that gives us 3 work sessions.
Yeah, hopefully we can get one. We can probably get through the 16th of December.
Okay, so yeah, that gives us.
I think
yeah.
that deadline's noon on Friday for the following Thursday, since the 23rd's a Thursday, so we luck out maybe on that one. And there's extra time, I think, on that one because of the holiday. I'll double check that.
But we have 3 work sessions to figure out what we're,
Right.
to get our,
And, 3 regular meetings. Right now, I haven't had discussions. It's been quieter than it has, so I'm dealing with, there's a lot going on, but I don't know of any upcoming major applications. So, things pop up, but I'm sure there will be things, but. So we may have, I guess my message is that, hopefully we would have some time in our regular first or second or third Thursday of the month, those meetings, to also keep digging away at this. And then if I'm not dealing with applications as much, then I can also have more time to dedicate this, and Susan can help too. So,
Mike?
I was going to kind of amplify what June was saying when you find the non-conformities, to fix that in the zoning regulations by going with the least restrictive. And I think that's a good approach. my thoughts. A lot easier to get through.
So this sort of general provisions, nonconformity is a big part of it, and the fences is another part, as kind of what I had on my list. We've talked some about the definitions. And the housing part, I think, are the ones that are be most realistic for us to be able to address this year.
So that gives us some administrative changes, because really, and I think this is kind of what you're getting at, Mike, that we're most likely to move this stuff through if they are administrative changes, and we're not really trying to change anything, we're just trying to capture.
Clarify.
Exactly, so.
Make it better for everybody.
Yeah, so we're trying to make the zoning ordinance work better for applicants, the planning board, for June, everybody. So it's not, these aren't changes necessarily so much as, clarification. I mean, I think the only change is if we work on the housing thing, but that's something that clearly there's a need for that.
6 units or more.
I mean, we're getting questions about 6 units or more, so.
And I think the presentations we heard, especially from George Reagan from New Hampshire Housing, that encouraging us to look at the regulations to see what opportunities we can do to create more housing. And there is an economy of scale that comes from from having more units per building. That, and I do believe that over 6 units, you then have to have probably a sprinkler system. I'm not up on building codes, fire, life, safety codes, but I do believe that is a threshold that does require, which in a lot of ways is a good thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about 6 units versus 10 units. 10 units might be in a sprinklered building, 6 might not. Which would you rather be in?
Yeah, there's some threshold that moves you from the residential code to the IEC.
Yeah.
So the requirements do change.
Which can make it more expensive, And when you have that sprinkler system requirement, it pretty much forces it to be on town water.
You can do it with a tank and a pump, but it's
cost-wise,
a pain.
it's
It's
I mean,
really
then you
expensive.
lose that sort of advantage
Yes.
cost-wise of. So I think I still want to look at this a little bit more, and I would like to talk to Susan about the housing, get her expertise, but just try to think about maybe moving that maximum of 6 units and allow it to go over 6 units by special exception, maybe in the multifamily zone. Would have to look where else that kind of makes sense. Possibly highway commercial, agricultural. Because those are places we allow multifamily now, but certainly not in the single family residential, obviously. And then village. So pretty much, I guess, everything but single family. Would that be kind of looking for guidance as I work on it?
Yeah,
That to me makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah, and then we should set up a list of sort of conditions beyond the generic ones for a special exception. Is there anything in particular we would want to ask, and what can we legally ask? Like one thought was, leases for no less than 12 months. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's legal, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's tough, because that does, if we're worried about the student population, that's one thing, but there is another type of seasonal population that comes in, that certainly, ski areas and lakefront or lake employees, things like that, so it makes it.
And how does that, like, in a lot of places, you will get a lease for 12 months,
Mm-hmm.
and then you will often be at will after that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how would that affect, like, or would
Yeah.
would there be no at will?
Yeah, and how do we really enforce it too?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's also, I guess that's kind of a.
Yeah,
As well, and sometimes those things are well intended, and you have to stop and say, like, how will Scott and I work on making sure that you're there for 12 months?
yeah,
Show me your lease,
yeah. Oh, maybe.
So I don't want to I always try to remember, it may sound like a good idea, you have to stop and say, how realistic is this to enforce it?
So what kind of questions should we be thinking about as far as that?
Criteria.
And is there a ceiling we want to put on that too, as far as maximum units? I have no idea. I just,
So there is a set of general, sort of generic, that any application for a special exception has to follow, which is on page 66 under the last, and towards the end, section 1204.2. So I would suggest looking over that. This is kind of by statute usually. I think that, the site's appropriate and adequate size. It won't affect the character of the neighborhood. No nuisance or hazard to vehicles or pedestrians. No excessive or undue burden on town services and facilities, and no effect on health, safety, welfare in the neighborhood. So those are very broad and hard, I think, at times for the board to really define, what's a nuisance. For me, it's different than you, so, but there are some things that if you look at then the next couple pages here that have some specific, you can create new guidelines for specific types of uses, so that would be the area to kind of looking at what that might require, so.
Just wondering are there any state guidelines, RSA stuff that comes into play in larger apartment buildings in terms of tenant rights and guidelines that we'd have to take into account?
I think they need
I could look it up, but
third floor, you need 2 entrances, I believe. I don't know if that's a state.
Again, that would probably be a building and fire life safety
Right.
code that's not part of the zoning, so
Of
it's
course,
not,
yeah.
so I
making sure we
don't
don't-
try to
just
interpret.
making sure we don't contradict any of those rules.
Yeah, I mean, I think whatever we come up with, we would want to talk to Scott as the building inspector and Jeremy at the, for the fire life safety, and just make sure that they're on board with, and just see what happens. I don't know.
Now, does it make sense to try and discuss this at our next work session a little more thoroughly? Or what's I feel like maybe one of these chunks of our
Yeah.
changes we need to talk about at the next work session, so.
Why don't I ask Susan, I'm going to talk with her early next week, to take a look at that aspect and give some guidance, some thoughts about what types of things might be appropriate as additional kind of defining what you need to do as a special exception, have a conversation with her about it, and give some information back to you guys for the next meeting, which will be a work session in October, if we can get it together by then. And just do as much as we can, but focusing in on those areas that I mentioned I had a list somewhere.
That sounds good.
Of, that these sort of general provisions, definitions, and housing, so more to, okay. I mean, there are other thoughts about housing, I think the other one is, we also should look at defining the conditional use permit for accessory dwelling units. I mean, it does say, I respect and think it's a good thing, the way that's written, but there's nothing that says what you have to do.
Right. We need to,
Is there an application
define the
fee?
conditions for the conditional use permit.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to come and get one, but, can you just walk in and, and get one? Come meet with you? I mean, how do you, an application that, creating an application process for it and charging a fee for it and notifying abutters, I think, is appropriate. So I think we just it doesn't define that now, so.
All right, so we'll have a further discussion about this on October 7th.
That's right.
Yeah.
Without me, I won't be there at that meeting, so have fun.
We could wait another.
I think the Bristol Select Board should reschedule their meeting.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
Hebron.
Excuse me. Got it.
Bristol's on Wednesday, so that would be fine. Oh, I gotta pay attention to what's next on the agenda. I think that's it, right? That's mine. All right, any public comments unrelated to the agenda tonight? Anything else from the board?
Next short meeting.
I mean, it will be if someone makes a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?